Right, so I thought probably the most important thing is that you want to give a quick overview of what is actually the program. So it's a 6-month internship that runs from January through to June of each year, and it's paid. Of course, so it's $29,700, slightly over that, I think it's like, and $6 change over that. You'll be based in Victoria, though of course, given the world of COVID that we're in, I think Kate, Mitch and Margarita can all speak to, they were all interns sort of during COVID. They can talk a bit about what it's like to have a combination of a sort of somewhat online cohort, a somewhat in-person cohort. Gagan, we can see, is in the photo here. I think a lot of these photos are from the 2019 group of people. And the key thing is it's an opportunity for recent Canadian graduates, so our best and our brightest, to become really familiar with the provincial government and both branches, both the executive and the legislative branch of the BC government. So you'll be working in a ministry of the BC Public Service, and our interns can tell you a bit about their specific experiences there to learn how the public service and the executive work, but you'll also be working firsthand on the legislative side. So with one of the 3 caucuses that's in the Legislative Assembly at the moment. So that could be the NDP, the Liberals or the Greens. Okay, and so what is it that legislative interns actually do? This is sort of a bit of a smorgasbord of all the potential things you could actually be doing. And again, I'll sort of refer you to the interns to tell you themselves about the specific things that they did. But we could sort of group it into, you could be doing some work that's on specific policies or specific pieces of legislation that are making their way through the Legislative Assembly when you're on the programme. So you could be reviewing or analysing those draft policies or those draft bills. You could often be producing some briefing notes to help MLAs get up to speed on a particular live issue, or indeed senior staff in their offices. But you'll also be sort of getting to know what sort of an MLA's actual day-to-day life is like, and equally what's a day-to-day working life like for people who work in the ministry. A lot of you may well be thinking of a career in provincial public service, for example. So you'll get to shadow MLAs, your mentors sort of in the ministry, at their meetings, and you might be asked to help research and write specific written products for MLAs, so statements that they're planning to give in the Legislative Assembly, for example, or press releases that they're doing. You'll also have 2 constituency weeks, so weeks back in the riding with particular MLAs that you're attached to. So, clearly a hugely important part of their job is connecting with their voters and helping people out with their interactions with government. And then finally, sort of things that give you an overview of the overall legislative progress of that session. So estimates debates, in other words, government expenditure, without which we couldn't really do anything. So you might well be called upon to do some research in helping MLAs prepare for the debates on the estimates. And when you're coming towards the end of a session, you might be involved in sort of tracking all the bills that have gone through, which ones became law, which ones are kind of sort of stuck in the process somewhere, and sort of so helping with session end documentation. Okay, so that's what you might be doing. I know a lot of people are often concerned about, what are the eligibility requirements? Is this something that you would be able to do? So there's a few. You must be a BC resident, so living here. You certainly don't need to have been here all of your life, but resident right now. You can be either a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident. Either of those immigration status is fine. And because this is really aimed at people who have either just finished their undergrad or who might potentially be in the first year of a grad program, but people who've completed their first bachelor's degree for any Canadian university, but within the last 2 years. So if you guys are planning to apply now and would want to be starting in the 2023 cohort, then you have to have either graduated in 2021 or you are going to graduate, i.e. finish program requirements this year in 2022. And so note it can be from any Canadian university, but by the time you apply, you would need to be resident in BC. So you may well have moved back here or be about to move back here. Okay, the deadline is coming up fast. So that's January 31st. I didn't put the entire URL on here because it could take up half the slide. But if you go to the Legislative Assembly's website, which is there, and you look under the Educational Programs and Workshops tab, you'll see the specific page for the legislative intern program, and that has all the sort of information you need to apply. Just to give you a quick overview, so you can sort of plan out the next 2 weeks if you want to apply. The online application form will be asking you about, what are your goals for the internship? What specific policy areas do you have an interest in? Why you'd be a good intern, what you can bring to the program. And because a very important part of the program is having a diverse and inclusive cohort of interns. So how could you contribute to that? We'll also need an up-to-date resume and then 3 references. So 2 of those should be academic, but 1 of those should be from outside, sort of the hallowed ivory halls, as they were. So we want to know, what are you like when you either in a work setting or voluntary work? That would be just as important and just as helpful. And then we'll need your official transcripts. Key point on that is that the website guidance is sort of saying that, or kind of how we all used to do it, that you'd send a physical copy, or you'd arrange for the registrar's office to send a physical copy. But again, a lot of universities are only providing electronic copies at the moment, so that's fine, but you need to arrange for the registrar's office to have sent it to the program's email address. You can find that on the website. Okay, and then the final thing I want to go is give you a sort of sense of what is the selection committee looking for. So the program director, the academic director review all the applications, and they select 24 people for interview. So that's with the selection committee, which is of reps from BC universities, including myself, and people who actually run the intern program. We will sort of do a panel interview with you. That's scheduled for early March. And we're hoping to have it physically in Victoria, but obviously that's a bit of a watch this space. We'll see how that goes. So as I said, we're looking to get a cohort of interns of roughly sort of 12 people who represent the diversity of BC. And obviously we're going to be interested in your grades, what you say in your statement of intent about why you're interested in this and what you can offer. Your references, and of course sort of your commitment to or interest in and interest to finding out more about BC politics. Now the various sort of attributes, which are sort of things we look for and things that your references are asked to write about when they do a reference, are the kind of things you'd expect for any kind of intern program or job. Obviously maturity. I think we've all been getting lessons in resiliency the past couple of years, good judgment and so on. But the one that I want to sort of flag up, because it's a bit different and a bit sort of not the norm, is non-partisanship. So interns can tell you a bit more about what that means in practice. But the key thing is, now, you guys are all interested in politics. No doubt you have your political views. You know which party you have more or less affinity with, but you could be working with the caucus of any of the parties. And of course, when you work in the ministry, then the ministry is currently controlled by one particular party or one government. So you need to be able to work across party lines, regardless of your own political views. And that sort of feeds into acting with integrity, that you treat information that's given to you that's confidential as such. Okay, that's all that I wanted to say about the program itself. I'm going to pass over to our interns now, and former interns, I should say. So I'm going to stop sharing. Now, we talked a bit about this before we opened up the session, and we agreed that we'd start with the 2 people who are currently interns, so they can tell you how things are going right now. So that'll be Mitch first, followed by Margarita. And then we'll move on to Kate and to Gagan, because they can tell you a bit about their experiences in the program, but also what they're doing now and how they have sort of used that in their careers going forward. Okay, so I'm going to pass over to Mitch now.
Awesome. Thank you, Claire. So hello, everyone. I'm Mitch. I'm currently with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. I'm in Victoria right now. I'm actually in the office, which is the traditional territory of the Lekwungen people. So the office is it's pretty cool. I'm not going to show you the office, which is what I've done to a lot of people, but it's not what I'm going to do right now because I'm not allowed to do that. But yeah, so I've started a couple weeks ago. Same as Margarita, as she will talk about as well. So it's only been a couple weeks, but it's been a really cool experience so far. We got to do, our first week was a lot of training, obviously, because it's a big job. and a lot to do, but we did get to go in person on the first day for, well, at least me for a little bit, because I needed to get some stuff, but then I had to leave early. Yeah, it's really cool to kind of see what things are like behind the curtain. And obviously with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, I've only been here a week and they've already like done so much for me and given me so many opportunities to like meet with so many different, very important people, or like get to like work on projects that actually like are impactful and like are going to be like actually doing something and introduce, like they keep emphasizing, like wanting me to actually feel like a big thing that they want to do that they've been saying is getting me to feel like I'm actually like contributing when I'm here. So it's been really super helpful. The people you meet are just really awesome and have been super helpful in kind of navigating the mass amount of various legal documents that exist in the government. And it's just been a super overwhelming experience to like come here and get to be a part of it. And yeah, obviously it's been online for a lot of it, but my ministry placement has been fortunate enough to be able to do a hybrid model. So I've been able to come in a little bit, which has been really great. But yeah, I mean, even online, I've noticed just like people reaching out to me and still caring to like take an interest and teach me things and not leave me hanging, which has been really cool. Yeah, I'll leave it there for now and let the other people go.
Thanks, Mitch. I really appreciate that. And it's good to hear sort of how people are working this out in the hybrid setting. All right, Margarita, I'll pass over to you.
Sure, thank you. Hello, everybody. As Claire mentioned, my name is Margarita. I'm also in Victoria right now, which is the traditional territory of the Lekwungen speaking peoples. Okay, where to begin? So I'll give you a little background about myself, and that'll kind of explain why I chose my ministry placement. I had a strong interest in law. As a poli-sci student, I took every legal-ish course that I could. I have a minor in legal studies, and I will be going to law school next year. So I kind of had a very strong focus on that. But that being said, I love politics and I love the combination of the two. So this program is great on that front. In the last couple of weeks, as Mitch mentioned, it's been a lot, kind of a learning curve. But all of that being said, it's been a really great experience thus far. Obviously, there's a long way to go, but I am currently working for the Ministry of the Attorney General in their policy and legislation branch. So similar to Mitch, we're working on legislation, working on amending certain policy changes. And as you can imagine, in the current state of our province and in the world, this is kind of a big deal at times because sometimes legislation isn't taking the traditional route that it often takes, which can take a long time, but you have to push COVID legislation, for example, fairly quickly. So we're in a kind of unique position where we can kind of see things come through the House and be kind of implemented from day one until it actually gets put through within the scope of our placement, which is really interesting. But yeah, I think specifically with this program, I'm sure you're all here for various reasons, but if you're interested in politics, the last thing I will mention is what Claire had been mentioning regarding nonpartisanship. There's a really big push and they'll really drill that into your brain, and I'm sure that the other interns can relate. But if you have for example, like I did, I was involved at the campus club level with, different groups and whatnot. Don't let that take you away from applying or anything like that. Just know that there's ways around it. We're all obviously, well, I'm not going to say we're all, but the majority of us are probably poli-sci students. So it's okay to be interested in politics. It's okay to have your own opinions, and the program does help you if you're not aware of how to treat nonpartisanship. You just really have to be upfront about it and not let that kind of close your mind off to all of the possibilities that you may be presented for. So if that's something that you're considering, because that's something that definitely was a consideration for me, know that that's not the end of the world. There's just, there's people who can guide you and kind of help you navigate that. But I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Margarita. And actually, that's really interesting to hear that experience because I imagine lots of people are involved in political parties. That's one of the ways in which you get interested in politics, right? So it's good to know that can be navigated. Okay, Kate, I guess you were the key COVID cohort, right?
Yeah, definitely. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Claire. My name is Kate. I'm calling from Burnaby, the traditional territory of the Squamish and Hunkaminam people. And yeah, as Claire said, because my cohort was in 2021, it was the first full year where it was all COVID. I mean, hopefully the last, I don't know. But so I started in January 2021, ended June 2021, and I'm currently a constituency assistant for an MLA Ann Kang, who is the Minister of Advanced Education and Skills Training. I graduated in summer of 2020. That was my last semester at SFU. And I did my ministry placement with Elections BC. So actually you can have your ministry placement in an independent office. So that could mean Elections BC, that could mean the office of the ombudsperson, the Human Rights Commission, which is a newly established, office at the BC government. So there's actually a whole other world of placements you can have if you choose to pursue this program. So I was their very first intern. So it was a lot of touch and go and a lot of learning of what the intern would do. But it was really exciting because as the inaugural intern, I got a lot of control over what that would look like for me. But that control didn't come till later when I felt more comfortable actually telling them what I wanted. I can imagine, as was the case for me as an intern, it can be quite scary and intimidating to actually go in knowing what you want and this is what I want to do. That's the first thing I'll say. You really don't have to know what your passions or exact interests are going into the internship because there's so much that you get exposed to. It's such a privilege. And they really, really welcome like earnest curiosity, which I was really intimidated by. I felt like I already had to know the entire provincial government process going in, but it turns out like open like minds and wide eyes are really the key to this internship. And I did my caucus placement with the government caucus, so the BC NDP government caucus, which is how I met all sorts of folks within that government. We're talking advisors, like senior advisors and policymakers, comms people. And from that, I was able to find my way here at the constituency office. If you're here because you're interested in the program, and I just want to emphasize how big of a deal this was for me in my growth and in my career, and I really, really, really recommend you apply and you try and get in because it's such a wonderful opportunity, and the legislature also really gets a lot out of it. It's such a beautiful kind of like relationship that they get such bright, moldable young minds, and you get such an exposure to this great place in the legislature. I'll leave it there, but when the web question time comes, I'm very, very happy to answer anything from like how to make your application stand out, or if you have any tips on that, to how to behave when you're an intern, or tips on what you can do after. But I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Kate. Actually, that's really interesting to remind me of the fact you can do your placement in an independent office as well. So there's a whole range of opportunities there. All right, Gagan, star of many, many BCLIP photos, because I think you guys are the last cohort where they were able to take lots of photos. So I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, hello, everybody. My name is Dugan Liddran. I'm currently living in Vancouver on the Coast Salish territories, particularly Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, so privileged to be here. I did my bachelor's in political science, and I currently work with the Ministry of Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations, Rural Development. I'm not pretty sure I messed that up. And I'm a communications officer, and I do special projects. I did the internship program in 2019. We had no idea what the world was going to look like the year later. So I would say it was definitely a privilege to be one of the last cohort to be able to have a full in-person experience. During my time, I was with Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, as well as with Government Caucus. So that was the BC NDP at the time. We were in a minority government at that time. So it was you could just feel sort of the tension. So there was definitely a lot of politics going on during our specific placement. And I would say that in terms of the internship and how it's helped me shape my career, it really helped me open doors. A lot of even in where I currently work, there's 2 other interns from the BC legislature. And in the interview, they stated, oh yeah, we have 2 interns from the legislature. So it goes to show that the program is very well known across government. And there's a lot of interns from years back are work in the public service. So just even having that on your resume is a huge privilege, a huge sort of uplifting in terms of what it looks like and the type of competence and the type of people that come out of the program. I took a very communication specific focus. So I really focused on learning about how to write content for government. I was very specific when I did my constituency assistant placements to ask the MLAs who offered me like suggestions of what I wanted to do. I was really interested in visiting search and rescue and going to visit the local fire department because I have an emergency management background as well. So it boded well for both the MLAs as well, because they got to build community connections and I got to go check out these local areas that I was quite interested in. So I would say that, unfortunately, I don't know if in that virtual world what it would look like, but the constituency assistant placements were my favorite experience. And working with the government caucus and really learning communications, writing blogs, learning what press releases were, you leave with so much experience and you leave with such a wide variety of skill sets, and you can really shape it the way you want it to look like on your resume and how you want to express it as well. So I would definitely say that the things that I've learned have been completely invaluable, and I will always remember my time in the internship as sort of one of the funnest periods of my life. And one thing that I think Mitchell mentioned is, yes, the interns are seen as sort of these really, like, because the internship program is so renowned, that name comes with it whenever you go anywhere. So people are always willing to say hi to you. They're super nice. And it's almost like having your 15 minutes of fame. And you'll always miss it a little bit, because after that, you go back to being normal, I guess, quotation marks. So it definitely missed the spotlight and just the energy with which people greeted me when I was in the internship program.
Thanks, Gagan, and thanks everybody. And that's a great thing to hear about the flexibility that you had to be able to shape the program to what your career interests were and what your career goals were. All right, I'm going to open it up to Q&A. So just a reminder that you can either post your question in the chat, or if you don't mind sort of being heard or seen on the recording, then you could stick your sort of electronic hand up. Just a reminder, that's under reactions at the bottom of the screen. And then equally up to you whether you want to have your camera on or off when you ask a question. So let's start with Valerie. You were the first person I saw.
Hello, everyone. Hope you're well. I wanted to ask about mature students and whether mature students have an opportunity.
Okay, I will just add in these sort of, logistical thing, and then I'll open it up to everyone else who might have some points on this. Mature students are obviously sort of hugely welcome. So what matters is when you finished your first degree. So if you completed your program requirements from your first degree within the 2 years prior to when it would start, so 21 or 22, then that's fine. But I wonder if any of the interns do you have any knowledge? Maybe you may have been a mature student yourself, or maybe you worked with people who are mature students. Any things you want to add on that?
I believe my cohort, the oldest intern, was 29. I don't know. I personally, I'm fuzzy on what counts as mature student and what counts as a regular student, but I'll speak to more about how if it would impact you at all, like on a subliminal or like a peer level. Definitely not. I would say that you might even have a bit of an advantage, because I guess part of the uncertainty of becoming an intern for me was heightened by just kind of being 22, just being like scared of everything and everything new. And I think if you're having a more experience under your belt with being a student or just being in the workforce, definitely makes you a lot more suited to just hit the ground running at the internship. It's such a wide open field for professional development, so it's definitely go for it. Don't let anything stop you. And interns come in all ages, shapes, and sizes, so it's really not. It's actually no one would really blink like twice if you're older than if you're above like 27.
So thanks. The reason I'm asking actually is because sometimes older students have different access needs. And I'm wondering in terms of your diversity, if that's something that's ever considered.
I can say that certainly when we're putting the panel together or putting the cohort together, we're particularly concerned about diversity. So that is in terms of obviously gender identity, sexuality, race, a whole range of other backgrounds. But I would imagine sort of age and family status would play into that too. In terms of specific, if there's accommodations or arrangements that might be needed, that of course I can't really speak to individual circumstances here. But if you had a specific question about that, I'm going to ask that you send me an email and then I can get in touch with the program manager at BCLIP and give you a more specific answer on that.
Okay, that would be great. If that would be great if you could just include it in the chat, maybe that way I have your email.
Absolutely. I'm just about to post my email here.
And I'm also just wondering, as an aside, like if the major had to be political science or any poli-sci, could you be outside of, like for me, it's psych and phil, so.
Yeah, no, you do not have to have a political science major at all. So, I mean, it just happens that people who study politics tend to be aware of this program and are therefore perhaps more likely to apply to it. But it absolutely doesn't matter what your major or minor is. We're interested in people from a whole range of disciplinary backgrounds.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Claire,
Ryan, you were next.
Oh, Claire, do you mind if I added just a quick thing?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Accommodation. So the BC government is mandated to help support people with disabilities come to work and be able to work effectively. So if you were placed in the public service, I think the only thing I would say is disclosure is definitely one of the hardest parts. As somebody who also has an invisible disability, disclosure has gone both ways for me. It can create more stigma or it can reduce stigma. So, but I do not believe that anybody in Caucus or anybody in the BC public service would see you as a hindrance for requesting an accommodation. I think that's something that's human right, and you should be allowed to have that. And I would just say that the only sort of big variable for me personally during the program was disclosure, because I was too nervous and too scared. And part of that was because I was young. So I didn't actually disclose my disability and I just suffered through it. But I look back at that experience and I actually wish I had the strength I have today to say that. So you being a mature student might actually help you in terms of accommodations as well.
Okay. Thanks, Gagan. That's really useful to know. Okay, Ryan, your question was next.
Yeah, I'm just curious, how competitive is the program? Because you had mentioned you're looking for 24 students. There'll be an interview. That's going to get cut down to 12, and that's just SFU. Is it like 500, 600, 1,000 students? Just wondering if you guys could speak to that.
So it is very competitive, yes, because I think as all of our interns said, it's a program that a lot of people want to get in, and it does sort of help you a lot afterwards. The 24 interviews are province-wide, so that's not just 20, it's not 24 from SFU students, that's of all the people who apply, which I understand from last year was several hundred. I wouldn't know, obviously we don't know how many are going to apply this year because the deadline hasn't passed yet. But we'll interview 24 people and then yes, that goes down to 12. Occasionally somebody who's in that initial 12 isn't able to do the program that year, because obviously of course life happens. So if you were made it to the 24, there's a possibility that you could be on the wait list, so then you might actually end up being in the cohort itself. Do any of the interns want to talk to that point?
I would just like to add quickly, so when I applied to the internship program, I actually didn't get an interview on the first round. I emailed my professor, Dr. Hurd, and I said, what can I do for next year? Because I wanted the internship program so badly. I was willing to get all the feedback I could and really hone my skill set to make it the next time around. I got very fortunate that I was next up on the list, and there was somebody who dropped out of the interview process. So call it luck, but that definitely helped me in terms of being able to get in. But it was a very competitive process. I was an honor student. I had a very good CGPA. I was doing everything I thought with my co-op get the interview. So not getting the interview was sort of like, it felt like my world had crashed around me. But I would say that if that happens to you, go to your professors, go to the program people and ask them what you can do better for next time, and really build on that skill set. And yeah, as somebody who had that happen to them, I got in eventually. So yeah.
I will also say, as somebody who's had many things I failed at throughout my life, or many things I've applied for which didn't work out, there's always the next thing. There is always the next time.
I'm sorry, Claire, I just wanted to quickly add, I applied as like a half joke. I was more like, might as well, right? Like I knew how competitive it was, and I didn't think I would get in, but you truly never know. And my advice is to really don't be afraid to personally reach out to folks and get advice in your application. I don't think I would have been so successful if I didn't ask somebody like, hey, like what did you do? That was so good. It's be blunt like that. I really think that it does help you out, just so you have somewhere to guide you. The questions are so vague. I personally really hate looking at questions like, tell us about yourself, or why do you want to be an intern? So definitely find an angle that would work.
And the key point as well is that because it's a 2-year window, that if you're all in an undergrad program now, then you actually have 2 chances to apply. You could apply now, and then you could apply a year later. So you could do exactly what Gagan and Kate were talking about get some feedback and then see how it went next time. Okay, I had Julia next on my list, followed by Abby.
Hi, yes, I just have a question about sort of the deadlines in response to, like, I'm not graduating this year. I'm planning, hopefully, if I can make it, I'm just kidding, but 2023, like December of 2020, that semester, like when would I apply to accommodate, like can I start that January, like if I apply for that January, does that work, or does it have to be like after 2 years, or is it a 2-year window, or when do you suggest I apply, especially because it is still 2 years away, but I am interested?
So I'd say you can definitely apply in your what you think will be your last year of your undergrad. And I realize that's not always easy to predict. But let's say you were planning to finish this year 2022, then I'd say definitely apply now, because you could then start in January of 2023. And I think that was both Mitch and Margarita's situation last year. But you can, I'll hand over to you in a sec to confirm whether that's the case or not. But if you were thinking that you're still going to be finishing off program requirements in 2023, then you wouldn't be able to apply now, because you have to have finished by the time you would be starting the program.
So apply in like the semester of 2023 when my requirements would be done in that semester?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And then that would be to start in 2024.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. I know there's a couple of other questions in the chat which are on a similar point. So I'm just going to quickly review those. And did any of the interns want to talk on that point?
Yeah, I can talk on that point. You mentioned graduating in December and stuff like that, like the plan to graduate in like a fall semester, basically. And that's what I did. So I applied last year in the 2021 application period. I was graduating in 2021, but not until the fall semester. So I graduated in December. But because, as like Claire said, as long as you're done, like I was done in December, the program starts in January. So you have the full year to finish the degree, which is kind of what happened with me. It was basically just like, I wasn't planning on waiting till December, just kind of COVID and a bunch of other factors kind of was like, I'll just wait till December. But so yeah, it definitely don't. Yeah, if you're graduating in December, then that's okay. You can apply for like the start of the next year, like in the new year, basically, as long as you're graduating.
And similar to that, I mean, I was a 2021 grad as well. I applied in January of last year, so kind of like a year ago exactly, but I graduated at the end of April. So I had the summer off and then the fall. So I took the summer, I worked, the fall I applied to law school, and now I'm starting the internship now in January. So you don't have to be a late grad or anything, as long as you're within the calendar kind of year. It really doesn't matter if you graduate in the spring, the summer, the fall, as long as you're eligible to start for the January based off your requirements.
Thanks, Margarita. And I know there was a question in the chat from Yinan asking if you're planning to graduate this semester or finish program requirements this semester, then yes, you can apply now. So apply before Jan 31st, and then that would be, you'd be eligible for the 2023 cohort. Okay, Abby, your questions next.
Great, thank you. I'm not sure if this is buried somewhere in the BCLIP website, but for the part where you intern with a political party, I believe that's 4 months of the program, are the seats for interns on each political party even, or is there more seats allocated to the NDP and the Liberals and less to the Greens? Yeah, that's the question.
My understanding is that it's proportionate to the size of the caucus, but I want to check with the interns because they have more up-to-date information on that. Mitch, you look like you wanted to jump in on that.
Yeah, I believe, and again, don't quote me on this, that I haven't started, but I believe that it's going to be 5-5-2. So five for the government, 5 for the official opposition, and then 2 for the Greens. Is kind of how it functions. And it used to not even be for the Greens. The Greens are a recent addition because once they got official party status, then they added new interns for the Greens. But yeah, so as far as I'm aware, it's 5-5-2.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Anyways, on that point, actually, so obviously Kate and Gagan, you've done your caucus placement, which Mitch and Margarita haven't done yet. You want to talk a bit about which party you worked for and sort of how it played into your experience?
Yeah, sure. I'll go first. I worked for the BC NDP government caucus. So there was 5 of us. And if you do decide to apply and you become an intern, you're gonna hear this a lot, but basically your work will vary extremely greatly depending on if you're placed with the government caucus versus official opposition. It's not really a party thing. It's more just the difference of what each caucus does. So official opposition interns and third party interns, you do a lot more work, like substantive work. That's mostly or purely because the government caucus has the entire public service on their side to do all the work that the interns in the other caucuses would do. So my friends in the other caucuses were actually like filming like videos and writing like speeches and like doing all that and actually researching for estimates, versus government interns didn't really get to do as deep. Like we did help, we did write some MLA remarks, but you really don't have as much immense responsibility as other interns do. The benefit of that, just why I love my caucus ultimately, is you just get so much opportunity to meet everyone you want to meet in the government. There is a rule in this internship where if you're, for example, placed with official opposition, the BC Liberals, you can't really speak with folks who are with the BC NDP government. So because the BC NDP government currently enjoys a majority and they're the government, you really get unlimited access to everyone in government. As I said, ministers, policymakers, all that stuff. So that's kind of a trade-off, and it's up to you to decide what's important to you. But that's going to be the general difference between the two.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, I think it's a perennial thing in any government program about the sort of disparity between resources that government MLAs or government MPs, depending on where you are, they have versus opposition and smaller parties. Gagan, I forget which caucus you were with.
I was with government caucus as well, so the BC NDP, but I would say definitely Kate covered a lot of what I was going to say about the fact that the workload isn't as intense as when you're with the opposition, but just the access that you have and really getting, and because you don't, like in my specific work, we were doing specific research or communications items. So I took time to get to know some of the MLAs more specifically. I would visit them, we would build connections because they would just come downstairs to our office where all the interns during our cohort got to sit together. So we frequently would speak with them. So I built a lot of good relationships, some of which are still long lasting, and really got to hone my communication skills, learn about press releases, and typically you're paired with somebody from the NDP caucus. So really get to know them and really get to hone your networking skills too, and go to evening events and go to like some of the fun speeches that the premier has, or some of the ministers do. So in reality, it was a little bit of a surprise for me at first, just shocking, but towards the end of it, I really got to take away so many other different experiences, and it was a lot more fun because you got to meet with all the MLAs and really have this direct contact. So yeah, I really enjoyed my time, but I know that my friends in opposition were working quite hard, and especially during budget prep, a huge time when they really utilize you a lot at that time, particularly because the resources aren't as high.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up on that I've spoken to another intern who was working for the Green Caucus, who said in some ways it's almost a bit of a parallel to what you were saying, Kate, about working for Elections BC, in that because the Greens hadn't had interns, or it's quite new for them to have interns, there was a lot of like working out, okay, what's the intern role going to have? But then the Greens were incredibly grateful to get this extra help. It was really, so that I remember that intern saying they actually were able to take a key role on quite a few major policy areas, and were also able to really shape their caucus experience in that way. All right, Ryan, you had a question.
I'm just wondering if you guys could speak to what it's like being based in Victoria. The cost of living is very similar to Vancouver, and I imagine, while not directly related to the program, it is a tangential thought. Is it difficult? Was it not as bad as you guys thought? How have you enjoyed Victoria?
Perfect. Thanks. Shall we start with Mitch and Margarita, because you guys are new to Victoria, and then we'll go back in time with Kate and with Gagan.
Sure, that's a great question, Ryan. And that was a question that I did not ask when I was going through this, so it was a little bit of a surprise for me. Funny enough, Mitch and I were supposed to be roommates. That ended up not working out because some things fell through, but the cost of living in Victoria is ridiculously high. Housing is incredibly difficult to attain. So that's kind of one of the biggest downsides if you're not already based in Victoria, which obviously probably you're not if you're going to SFU. That being said, you're going to be here for 6 months, so it is difficult to find 6-month leases and housing in general. So the best approach that I kind of came to this with was not coming to the internship with high expectations in terms of like my living arrangements. You really do have to just kind of say, okay, you're here to learn, you're here to work, you're not going to be living in probably the nicest of apartments, because the reality in Victoria is that you kind of have to sign your firstborn away and like give them a kidney to get a nice apartment. And that's just not the reality unless you're really lucky. You do get compensated well for the cost of living. So the wage that you are making is going to be enough to cover your cost of living and whatnot. Another thing, when you do decide to, if you do decide to like share an apartment or something with another intern, it does put restrictions on where you're going to be working in government or in caucus. That being said, for example, if I was working for the opposition and Mitch was working for the government, there would be a conflict of interest. So we couldn't live together, obviously, but if we were living together, we would be restricted to the same caucus. So that's just one thing to keep in mind if you're going to find a roommate within the group of interns. But yeah, it is expensive. I'm not going to lie to you. But if you're coming here to like kind of make as much money as you can, probably not the greatest place to live. But if you're coming to learn and to work, you'll be able to live well.
Thanks, Margaret. Actually, that's a really important point about roommates versus caucuses. Thank you. Mitch?
Yeah, I can pretty much echo everything Margarita said. It was definitely expensive, and especially with the way that the situation is in Victoria right now and COVID and all that stuff, there is a shortage of housing. So it does get quite high. I know that I went on Facebook at one point to ask people for housing, and I put up my price range and got absolutely berated for one hand, for owners saying that I was going too cheap, and renters saying you're the reason that pricing is so high. What the fuck are you doing? Excuse my language. Sorry. So I got basically berated almost. So it can be a little difficult to find housing. And me as a relatively used to be cheap person, I was definitely trying to pretty much balance, like especially someone who's also trying to go do a master's program afterwards. I was trying to balance housing costs with saving money for masters afterwards. And you kind of have to realize eventually you just hit a point where you're like, you're not going to meet your expectations. Like Margarita said, you're not really going to save as much money as you think. You're not really here to save money. This is a golden opportunity to get access to a lot of different things and really, jumpstart your career in a really good way. And you kind of just gotta, you have definitely get paid enough to rent a place. So don't worry about trying to be super cheap and get the cheapest place that you could possibly find to save as much money as you possibly can, because that's just not going to work. Yeah.
Thanks, Mitch. And I think we're all very aware that the housing crunch and the housing crisis. I'm sure SFU students can't escape that. So it's important to talk about. Gagan?
I was just going to say my biggest regret in terms of where I picked to live was that I was in Oak Bay, so I wasn't downtown Victoria. And because a lot of the work you're doing is in the legislature and within like ministry offices, you're primarily there. And then you're going out with the interns in the evening, or you're going to events in the evening. So it was really hard for me because I would have to take a bus back. And the buses are not the best in the evening, but throughout, for the most part, they're quite well. So really think about that as well, and just access in terms of where you want to be and function as well.
Thank you.
That's so funny. I got a place in Gordon Head, which is even further away than the French, because I wanted to be cheap. I don't regret it. It really is. It does save you money. But then other interns would like walk across the street and go home, and I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna hop on the 28 now. I just want to add that for me also, I never lived away from home before, and moving in January and winter during COVID, I found it incredibly isolating at first, because the luxury of being born in Victoria, or having already lived in Victoria, is that you have a network and how the city works. So it was definitely rough for me for the first month or so, but it really does get better when the sun shines in Victoria. The whole city changes. Like the flowers come out, and like it's so much nicer. Mitchell Margarita, it's coming, I promise. It'll be great.
If I could just add something quick too on the Gordon Head thing, because I'm also in Gordon Head. But when I was in the Lower Mainland, so this is about temporary access on the Transins. So when I was in Lower Mainland, my family lives in Ladner in Delta. So dependent on where you live, like if you're in the outer banks of the region, then your transit ride is already an hour plus. So it's a long transit ride here comparative to like other transit rides in Victoria. But if you're used to doing hour-wide transit rides, it's not that bad. Like I'm used to get from Ladner to Burnaby, I'm used to doing an hour 40, 2 hour plus transit rides to get there. But in Gordon Head, it's about a 35-minute transit ride. So it's long, but like comparatively, to keep it in my head, I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah, it's long, but I've done way longer for a long time. So I can survive this.
I totally agree. And Victoria people cannot believe you would fathom to like transit 30 minutes, or it's like SFU students are so commuter based. So like I totally agree with you, Mitchell. It's not actually that big of a deal.
Yeah. And I think SFU students are generally transit and commuter veterans, are they not? Okay, we've got a couple of minutes left, so I just want to make sure that anyone who had a question has been able to have a chance to ask it. So if anybody has something else they'd like to ask, please post it in the chat now, or wave your electronic hand around, and we'd be happy to answer it. I'm just going to skim through and make sure I'm not missing anybody. Ryan, you had a question.
I promise, last one, and then someone else can take over. I guess I got this question for you, Gagan, but anyone else that can jump in. What is the work-life balance like? Because Gagan, you mentioned you're doing late night functions and events, but then with COVID, things are online. So it's like, am I expected from like 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., like, oh, Zoom cocktail party or something? Or, well, I guess it's a little ridiculous, but you guys get where I'm going with this. What's the work-life balance like?
Yeah, great question. So in government caucus, we were recommended not to work past our time off. So like 4:30 was when we typically left the building, and in particularly there, it was like there was really no work after that. So, and most of the MLAs or folks were in other committee meetings or kind of wrapping up their day. And the events are always optional. It just, in terms of of like politics, perception is reality. If you don't show up to some of those events, they might think, you know, are you not enjoying your experience? Or it might be a little, because a lot of your mentors or people that you're working with in Caucus will be there as well. So it's a really great networking opportunity. We did have one person who didn't come to any of the events, but some of the people were kind of like, oh, is she okay? And are we doing something wrong? It was just because she didn't want to and she was exhausted by the end of the day. But it is always nice to just say that in advance if that's something you're not willing to do. I would say in terms of work-life balance, it is quite busy. So like take care of your mental health, make sure you're working out if that's something you're interested in. Alcohol was definitely something that was free and flowing. So just be cautious of how much you drink and how much you want to drink and what your relationship looks like to those types of things when you're out there. But definitely, I would say you make it your own, and you can choose to go to events, you can choose to opt out, and determining how long you want to stay out is really a personal choice. But overall, going to those events, I would say even just for like an hour or two is really valuable because of the networking opportunities and because of the people you meet there as well.
Thanks, Gagan. Actually, a lot of important points there. I've got one more question that I want to go to, but I just want to see if any of the other interns wanted to weigh in on that particular point about work-life balance.
Yeah. Sorry, Claire. I just want, like, it's life totally changes after when you factor in the pandemic. A beautiful picture that Gagan paints. But yeah, that wasn't my experience. There wasn't any events. Alcohol was not free flowing available. But it's I definitely agree that if you want to take this program and maximize it, you really do end up giving most of your time to it. Like I ended up very devoted to it by the last like 4 months. Like it was all I was doing, was seeing interns and seeing folks. But I had fun doing it. I wasn't spiteful about this choice that I had made to commit fully beyond work hours. So government caucus, they're a lot more 8 to 4, 9 to 5, but other caucuses are not like that, especially during session. Work tends to be a lot more intense. So, but yeah, Gagan's absolutely right. Like you can decide how much you want to put into it. So yeah.
I'll just add one quick thing. I know we're short on time, but just like the comparison between Gagan and Kate's years for Mitch and I, some of the things that are in a traditional year are still happening. Some are virtual. For example, there's a trip to Washington that happens every year that Kate's year didn't get to go on. We won't be going on. We'll be doing a virtual meeting with the Washington interns. However, hopefully, if everything goes well, we'll still be able to go to Ottawa for our exchange with the PIP interns, which is like the federal program. Likewise, they're hoping that our constituency weeks will still get to be in person. So some of the fun things that you get to do aside from the program, hopefully will be better in next year's cohort and the year after that, assuming that all goes well. With COVID, they've really tried to be cautious of both public health orders, but also giving us most of the program when available.
Sorry, classic mistake, talking while muted. Thanks, Margarita. I'm sorry you guys don't get to go to Washington. Okay, Yunan's been waiting patiently, so I'm going to go to him for that question, but also Valerie was also asking about what are the COVID policies in place. So perhaps we can group those two questions together. Yunan.
Thank you. So I'll just have two quick questions. One is in terms of the reference, what do they really want to see? What kind of things should I let my reference to write about? And then the second question is for the cohort, will you choose your point of interest or the area of interest, or will they put you randomly and assign you to a random group?
Okay. Thank you. So I'm going to ask the interns to maybe sort of pinpoint one thing that you think helped your application to stand out. Also maybe sort of answer the point about the amount of choice that you've got of a placement or caucus. And then perhaps Mitch and Margarita, because you have the most up-to-date information about anything you've been told about COVID policies, would be great. Thank you.
Sure.
Perhaps Margarita, do you want to start?
Yeah, for sure. Interest-wise, you do get a choice. You're asked your ministry or independent office preference. So like I mentioned, I had an interest in law. My first choice was with the Ministry of the Attorney General. However, I did have 2 backup options. And in terms of your other question about what had for your references, a big thing for me, because I was involved in campus club politics, I wanted to highlight the fact that even though that I had a partisan role to me, I was capable and willing to work in a nonpartisan environment, because that was a big deal. I didn't want the committee to only view me for my one focus. I was more than happy to be in a nonpartisan environment. So that was one thing. The only other thing that I would suggest, I mean, everybody has their different backgrounds. I don't know if you focused more academically, if you've done work experience or anything, but find something that would make you stand out. So whether that's something that you can take from your work experience, this still is an academic program, so they do care about your academic transcripts. I think interview process, that will be reiterated to you a lot, that it is still an academic environment. In a non-traditional sense, you're not taking lectures or anything like that, but you are there to learn. So your willingness to learn is also going to be a big benefit to you. And if you have that kind of keen curiosity and interest to you, then that makes it all the better, because you really are here to learn in a plethora of ways.
Thank you, Margarita. Mitch, do you want to just quickly weigh in?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, real quick, in terms of references, I mean, my references were I don't know exactly what they wrote, so I can't speak to exactly what they said, but I know that they were great because I had a lot of references. Like, you want to make sure you get professors that know you really well. I know that, for instance, Claire, for a lot of the programs I was applying to, Claire was one of my references. Just on that, thank you, Claire. And then, so like, the references that I had were really awesome and people that I knew for a long time, so I know that they could speak, and they also asked for information. So you'll get help and guidance from your references on how to, what information they would want from you when writing it. So you'll get help from them there. In terms of the interview, I don't know, I just had fun in the interview. I joked around with the people there. I got them talking. I was in a debate meeting. Sorry, not a debate. I was at a debate tournament that weekend, and I forgot to mute my Discord. So a bunch of debates started going off in the middle of my interview, which was a little unfortunate, but everyone laughed it off, so it was cool. I just had a good time because they're people too, and it's a little bit more of an informal, formal type meeting, so I had a good time. And in terms of the COVID policies, it's touch and go. I mean, we pretty much just have to go off of what the suggestions are. We just got a heads up today pretty much that like things are probably going to be around the same that they are right now for a little while. It's kind of just out of our control. I mean, I could tell you what the COVID policies are right now, but the COVID policies next year are going to be completely different than the COVID policies now. But I will say we have to follow the same guidelines that the rest of the province. We don't really get any special exemptions or anything like that. It's the same guidelines, it's the same restrictions. I'm in the office because I had to fill out a form that said I'm totally fine. And I'm also in an office where there's only like 3 other people here on the whole floor. So that's the only reason I was even coming. So it's the same as everywhere else.
Thanks, Mitch. And so we'll just finish off by, if Gagan and Kate wouldn't mind, maybe pinpointing one thing that you think helped your application stand out.
I was in honors. That's a huge one. Being in honors is a huge one. Pick a theme, an issue that you really want to highlight, and let your whole application reflect that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's really good advice. If I have a central story or theme that you want to talk about. Gagan.
For me, definitely co-op was really valuable. Obviously, for some of you who are already kind of at the end of your degree, that might not be feasible, but like really highlighting your volunteer experiences or your experiences on campus. Also, another thing, this program offers a sort of PDF version of the requirements and sort of skill sets that they're looking for in the job requirements. So you can always send that to your references, or particularly if you have professors who don't know about the program. I was fortunate, my professors knew about the program, but if they hadn't, I would have sent them the link to the program as well to really highlight sort of the key competencies that are required.
It's a great idea. And I thought whenever I'm writing references, I ask people to, if I don't know the program, tell me about it. But more importantly, I ask people to give me 1 or 2 lines on why they are a great fit for that program and why they want to do that program, because then I use that to tailor my letter or tailor my form.
I was
Okay.
just going to add that actually, sorry, for example, I didn't have that luxury. I had a lot of difficulty finding professors, not finding professors, but like feeling comfortable asking them because I had a lot of virtual classes in my last 2 years.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, just email them and they're 9 times out of 10 going to be really willing to help you. I had my academic professors were not professors that I had known for years. There was somebody that I had taken 1 or 2 classes with in the past, and they were still willing to help me. I just explained who I was, what I was trying to do in the program. And if you're a good student, you know, they'll probably want to help you. So just don't be afraid to ask, even if you don't have the traditional, you know, 2+ year relationship that you would normally have, because I haven't seen my professors in years at this point if I was still a student, right? So
yeah, that's really good advice. And actually the final thing I will say is contact them as early as you possibly can, because we get a lot of requests for references. And of course, we absolutely want to help people, but there's a limit on time. So I know I tend to, I do it in the order in which I'm asked if I'm going to do a reference. All right, thank you everyone for joining. Thanks for all of your questions. I've posted my email address again at the bottom of the chat. So if you do have specific questions to the program, please email me. I will just let you know, because it's still the beginning of the semester, I'm getting a lot of email. So if I don't reply straight away, I am going to reply to you, but it just may take a day or two. Thank you to Margarita, to Mitch, to Gagan, to Kate for all of your experience and for coming and talking so frankly about the program. That's been fantastic. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
have a great day, guys.
Thank you. Take
Good
care.
luck.